Hey guys, what's going on? Tim Avery here with Visual Testaments, and I just had a thought after a conversation I had with a friend of mine who was preparing a sermon for his message over the 4th of July holiday, and it's quite concerning of some of the things that are happening right now. Obviously, some of you guys have known that they've passed some rule or regulation about church members not being able to worship inside of their congregation because they feel like the forceful um, singing or praising would put more particulates in the air that would infect people with COVID or potentially, harm people with COVID. So my thought process is this with that, and so it's interesting to see the world's demise and the perceived. Let me get this right. The perceived persecution to the church. Okay, because here's my question and here's my concern. Okay, so we've had a lot of peaceful protests with people yelling and screaming and hooting and hollering and forcefully projecting things into the air. Now, some people may argue, well, they were outside, so it doesn't really matter. But there are a lot of churches, like the churches I attend right now, we're meeting outside, and so, and we're still worshiping and singing. And so, if this thing is perpetuated throughout the different states to where we can't worship and sing at church service, that's a big problem because if it can't be a double standard, is what I'm getting at. You understand what I'm saying? There can't be a double standard. If we can protest in the streets, scream obscenities, or scream our rights. I won't even say obscenities because it's pretty much a no point. It doesn't matter what you're screaming. If you're forcibly projecting your voice and particulates in the air, then it doesn't matter what you're screaming. You could be potentially passing on COVID if that's what they're going to say. Okay, so if we're doing that the same thing in a church service, then we really need to make that a rule for everyone, or don't make it a rule at all. You can't infringe that upon a church service because that's just wrong. Okay, so the other thing I had a concern with is that my friend, after talking about, he was preparing a sermon, that his sermon was blocked. He was talking about different things about uniting, different nationalities, racism. I hate that word racism because I don't really like that word. It's a very bad depiction of what it is. But he was bringing together, or preaching a message about bringing together ethnic backgrounds that were all one blood, one human race. And so, and his message was heavily in about that topic. He was hitting it hard, is what he was saying. And so during the social media live, I'll say it like that social media live was cut out and dropped and now blocked to ever being viewed again because of the things that he was saying on there. Now, I want to know if there's still a constitutional right, freedom of speech, to be able to do that on a social media platform. Now, if these platforms are uh, monitored by non-Christian believers, and they feel like their rights are violated, or their worldview is being violated because of what was said, then that still fringes upon constitutional right of freedom of speech, and you can't just censor somebody because you don't like what they said about homosexuality or whatever, about you, especially about uniting a human race. I mean, that's just silly in and of itself. But I will say this is that it's interesting to see what the world is progressing into. Okay, now we all know that a lot of churches aren't meeting. By and large, a lot of churches aren't meeting. Some of them are meeting, but by and large, a lot of churches are meeting online. Okay, and are using social media outlets. So my thought pattern was that, okay, if this guy's message was being censored because of what he was saying, how quickly can social media outlets censor church sermons because they don't like what was said, especially if especially if it's a church, if it's a sermon that's speaking against the worldview of homosexuality, abortion, or whatever. If calling those things sin, then how quickly can those entities, those social media entities, block those messages? And just because it doesn't go with the worldview. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm concerned with that. So my thought is to look out for that, and if that does happen, we need to stand up, and as a church, by and large, telling the world of the social media outlets that our constitutional rights are being violated by using these social media outlets, so that way we can still speak our viewpoint regardless of whatever they whatever, if it goes against their viewpoint, because that's irrelevant. I mean, we're supposed to be in a world where we can express our God-given constitutional rights to speak freely, because that's a constitutional protected act as civilians and as Americans. Um, so I'm just kind of concerned, kind of fired up about that, and I was listening to the story of my friend who gave the sermon, and I was just like, I was troubled, because if this is where the world is going, we need to wake up, church. We need to wake up and understand that things are being taken from us very subtly, and and we need to be awake and be aware of what's happening around us. So I think it's interesting that all church services had to close down. I know a lot of people are fighting for the right to be able to open up their church services. They've opened up all restaurants. They've pretty much opened up all retail stores, with stipulations that they can only a certain percentage of people can be in at a time. So we need to make sure that we are not being targeted as church members, that we can open our church doors if we decide to meet again. Okay, so we need to exercise our right. Okay, we can't just be timid about this. We can't just be humble about this. We need to understand that we need to be able to meet. We need to be able to worship and pray. That's also in our amendment. That's in our constitutional right to do those things. And the government can't force us to not be able to worship, to not be able to meet. They can't. That's a constitutional right, and we need to be able to exercise those things freely without it being persecuted. So we've got to stand up, we got to speak, and be able to do those things. Okay. The other thing, side note on this, about the whole spraying particulates in the air. This is something that I'm watching. Okay, I'm watching this because I think it's very interesting as it develops moving forward. Okay, I'm watching this because it's very interesting. Now, follow me on this. Okay, follow me on this. If churches are being silenced because they can't worship, because they feel like the forceful projection of our voices are putting particulates in the air, then when these um, sports go back into action, I know soccer has been playing games and their stadiums are empty. Okay. Now, as football season approaches, I wonder if, okay, follow me on this. I wonder if these stadiums will be half full with social distancing, 6 feet apart. Maybe, we can't sit right next to somebody, or maybe, 3 seats down, then you have available seating. But I wonder if, these fans will be silenced. Think about this: the forceful projection of cheering on your team as they make a touchdown, hooting and hollering at the top of their lungs. Is that still not projecting the same amount of particulates in the air? So I wonder. I'm watching this to see if these guys are being silenced the same way the church is being silenced, because there can't be a double standard. Like I said in the very beginning of this, there can't be a double standard. There has to be equal opportunity for everybody for that. So if they're allowing fans to come back into the stadium and still allowing them to hoot and holler and cheer with their fans for their teams, that's totally fine. But you can't go back and say, churches, you cannot worship because the fear of spreading COVID. So that's one thing I'm watching. So pray for that. Watch that. Be on the lookout. If you're a church leader, pray about that. Stand up for your rights. Go to talk to your city council, your mayors, your city manager, whatever. Um, Send a letter to your governor, your senator, whatever. Do what you need to do to make sure that you're exercising your freedom of being able to meet as a church. It's a constitutional right to do that, but also make sure that these rights aren't infringed and targeted on churches, so that way we can do the freedom of living and worshiping God. Okay, because obviously we're getting closer and closer to the times of the end, and some of these things will say that the church will be persecuted, but doesn't mean that we just need to lay and just be persecuted. Okay, we just need to stand up for our rights. Okay, love you guys, bless you guys, stand up for your rights, and I'll talk to you later.